Well, hey everybody, I'm John Ritland, back with another ranking video. And this time it's every WCW Tag Team Champion ranked from worst to best. And this is going to be a bit of a lengthy one because I have 87 different pairings that held the WCW Tag Team Championships, all the way back from when Jim Crockett Promotions owned the company till the Invasion angle died out. And yeah, the Invasion angle, whew, oh boy, that was rubbish. That could have been done a whole lot better. But yes, I'm not going to include the U.S. Tag Team Championships, even though those are, prestigious championships and some good teams held them. I'll probably do one at some point about the NWA Tag Team Championships and U.S. Tag titles and maybe just, compile that. This is just focusing on the WCW World Tag Team Championship belts, titles, whatever you want to call them. And a lot of great pairings have held them. Some have held them for multiple months, some almost a year. Classic matches, everything. And sometimes they were just put on two top stars, a hot potato, and the hot potato the belt, and to get an angle over and stuff like that. That's nothing new. All-star pairings have happened and had the tag titles put on them for decades and everything. It happens a lot in WWE and in other companies. And it happened in WCW as well. I made this list based on how many reigns, each team had, how long the reigns lasted, how prestigious the reigns were. Did it get the belts over, or did it just devalue the titles? What did it do for the pairings? What did it do for the tag team division at that time? So that's what I'm going to do. And I also do want to make note that later in this list, I actually have two entrants on in the same spot, essentially because I couldn't figure out how to rank those, and I figured I'd just smush them together because they kind of tie together. I'm also going to do one about the Cruiserweight and Light Heavyweight Championship belts at some point and match those together. That's going to be a whole lot of fun. But anyway, let's get on with this, and we'll see how many videos I end up doing. At least 2, possibly 3. So we move on to the last entrant. That's number 86. It's the Boogie Nights. They had it for 4 days, and it was a 1 title reign. Yeah, Alex Wright and Disco Inferno were tag team champions. I like Alex Wright. I think that he actually got a bit, underutilized after a bit in WCW, but fucking Christ, giving Disco Inferno a tag team championship, or any championship, is never a goddamn good idea. Sweet Christ, how is this dumb fuck still wrestling even now? That being said, the Boogie Nights, it was a way, they had already completely torpedoed Alex Wright's character by this point. They only got it for 4 days. Did not last very long. This is when WCW was just throwing titles on anybody because that's a swerve, bro. Yeah, it just wasn't a very good idea. I mean, the pairing, they were a comedy duo, whatever. Give them the tag titles for a couple days, but it's just, you gave Disco a championship. That's fucking stupid. Then we move on to number 85, the Misfits In Action. They barely held it for 1 day, so obviously it was 1 reign. The Misfits In Action, General Erection, Hugh Morris, Lieutenant Loco, that was Chavo Guerrero Jr., and then Corporal Cajun, that was Lash LaRue. I don't remember Lash LaRue wrestling much past, like a few appearances on Impact. Well, actually, NWA TNA when it first happened. So I don't know what happened to him. Misfits In Action, nothing against the talent. Well, nothing against Chavo Guerrero Jr., nothing against Lash LaRue, and plenty against, Hugh Morris, build him up because he's a fucking idiot. But yeah, Misfits In Action, MIA, do you get it? It makes sense because actually this gimmick is more like KIA. It was just so goddamn bad. And they only had it for, they had it for 1 day. Less than a day, a couple hours. It just, why the fuck do you even bother putting titles on somebody if you're just going to do something like this? It's fucking stupid. So, we move on then. Number 84, Vampiro and the Great Muta. This was the Dark Carnival era. Muta's run in later WCW was a little bit odd. I mean, he was still wrestling primarily in Japan, but did make appearances in WCW, and I never understood this pairing exactly. It was interesting, but also you then had ICP involved, and I'm sorry, ICP never belonged in wrestling. Did good shit with their money for as far as charity and stuff, but no, never liked them in wrestling. But Vampiro, Great Muta, what? And I like Vampiro and Muta. I just never understood this pairing at all. And then we get to number 84. Luger and the Giant, 1 day, 1 reign. They won the titles, and then if I recall correctly, they had the titles taken away because Giant wasn't medically cleared, despite the fact he was in the goddamn ring. That's something I never understood in wrestling all the way back, like in the 80s, 90s, that kind of, oh, he wasn't medically cleared, we have to take the belt off of him. How the fuck was he competing? Does nobody want to, bother controlling the wrestlers? I know the Giant, is a big guy. You can get enough people to try and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. But no, him and Luger won the titles for one day. It just fucking so fucking goddamn stupid. So goddamn ridiculous. But then we get to number 82. Perry Saturn and Chris Benoit. They held it for 3 days. This was when, even though they had a lot of really, really good tag teams in WCW, and they even had a lot of good tag teams in 2000, this is when Saturn and Benoit, who were a very unlikely team, but a very good team, they won the titles, and then, I mean, they dropped them very, very soon after. This, I believe, happened in 1999. It was just an odd move. It was just an odd move to, like, suddenly just throw the belts on somebody for, like, 3 days. Two very good talents, and, you know, they certainly worked well together, but, oh, wow, they won it to a big pop and then lost it a couple days later. It makes no goddamn sense. It's fucking stupid. Stop fucking doing that. Well, WCW is out of business anyway, so it's not like they can keep doing this. But whatever. It just wasn't very good. We then get to number 81. Goldberg and Bret Hart. They held it for 6 days. And it was one title reign. Let me make something very clear right here. This is when they were building up this whole thing to Starrcade 99. Where it was going to be Bret Hart against Goldberg for the WCW Championship. And they put the belts on him for a little bit. And then they, I believe, lost him back to Nash and Hall. Just the next, I think it was like, I think they won him on Thunder, and I think lost him on Nitro the next week. It just is a really, really weird timeline for WCW. It wasn't necessary. I mean, by this point, they kind of already torpedoed the tag team titles anyway, even though a couple teams in 2000 tried to bring prestige back to them. That being said, they were trying to revitalize Goldberg's character after they themselves had torpedoed the fuck out of it from Starrcade 98 and then through part of 99. So yeah, this was just, and then they did the thing with Starrcade 99 where Goldberg accidentally, I want to emphasize accidentally, did injure Bret Hart pretty severely, and his career ended shortly after. Tag reign was just bullshit, though. It was just bullshit, because it was just pointless. It was goddamn pointless. We get to number 80, it's Conan of Raid. They were part of the Filthy Animals. Merry Christmas, you filthy animals. You know, Home Alone. Hi, I like to make dated references. And not that you could tell. 6 days, and it was one reign. Conan and Ray worked pretty well together. They are longtime friends, apparently still friends, and that's great. But, you know, Filthy Animals was a weird stable because they would have like a feud with the West Texas Rednecks. They teamed up with Master P's No Limit Soldiers, which was really, really goddamn odd and stupid. Well, I mean, at least Conan and Ray did. I never quite understood why they made, WCW was very stable heavy, and this was a weird stable, and it was also a weird time because Ray was totally unmasked. But this is just another one where like, oh, they won it and then they lost it like a few days later. It is pointless. It was just so goddamn pointless. Then we then get to number 79. Wahoo McDaniel and Rufus R. Jones, 7 days, one reign. It's really all I got. Wahoo McDaniel was figured in pretty prominently to a lot of stuff that happened in Jim Crockett Promotions, which made sense. He was pretty over in the Carolinas in a lot of areas. Rufus R. Jones, I don't know too much about him. I know that he was pretty over in some areas. I believe he was over in Memphis, but correct me if I'm wrong. And he was also over for Crockett to an extent. So yeah, putting the titles on somebody, okay, it's not like this is anything new. Crockett would do that. They would hotshot that kind of stuff. But 7 days really isn't anything of note. And we then get to 78. It's Crowbar and David Flair. One reign, and they held it for 15 days. David Flair is a U.S. champion and also a WCW Tag Team Champion. By contrast, others never held a belt like that, but David Flair did. Now look, once again, David Flair didn't want to be in wrestling. They put him in wrestling. It didn't end up working out ultimately. Okay, is what it is. Whatever. I didn't get this pairing with Crowbar at all. I didn't think that it was a very good idea. And now it was using David Flair as a bit of a crazy character, and he seemed to be having more fun because he didn't really have to work. And it was probably actually the best use of him. But, you know, it was what it was. Okay, cool. It happened. I just hate that David Flair was a champion. And he may not want to be. I mean, he may have said, no, this is a really bad idea, but he was young and they wanted to push him as a Flair and they wanted to use him as a top heel or at least a mid-card heel. I just didn't fucking get it. And yeah, the fact that can tell you just how bad these are. You know, some of these rankings are that David Flair actually ranks up this high on the list. This is sounding needlessly mean to David Flair when actually there's nothing wrong with the guy. He just shouldn't have been in wrestling, and even he has admitted it. 77, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Slater. They held it for 7 days. Dusty Rhodes and Dick Slater, two pretty goddamn good workers. Dick Slater, in particular, is a pretty good worker. Doesn't, I think, get the credit, at least in the ring. I mean, outside the ring, you guys can judge on that on your own. Dusty Rhodes, though, one of the top stars. Him, and it's not the only time he teamed up with a guy named Dick Murdoch. You know, they were a pretty goddamn popular team all over the world, you know, for a number of years, especially in, you know, the earlier AWA. Him and Slater, I mean, it was 7 days. What do you want me to say? Number 76, Public Enemy. 1 reign. They held it for 8 days. I never liked the Public Enemy gimmick. I never thought it was all that good. I never thought the Public Enemy was necessarily that good. That's not to say that they weren't good workers. I just thought the whole table shtick and all that, it just got old. It was old in ECW. It was old in WCW. And they were barely in WWE for, like, you know, more than a cup of coffee before the Acolytes beat the shit out of them. Because, of course, Bradshaw decided to bully people. I'm shocked. I'm not. Unfortunately, I believe both members of Public Enemy have passed away. I know Rocco Rock did. I think Grunge did. If he didn't, I'm not trying to write him off, but I believe both did pass away. They were good, and they were good for a niche market. They did get over. They did have some fans. I just never got the appeal. And also, 8 days. 8 days as champions. The fuck. Then we get to number 75. Booker T and Test. 13 days. 1 reign. Yep, here we get to invasion territory. And I'm talking, you know, WCW, ECW invasion, not actually invading anything like that. We're not getting into a, you know, a War of the Worlds thing here. Because we're not going to give the aliens the flu. Boy, this has gone off really, really weird and gone off the rails. Booker T and Test, very odd pairing, very good pairing of talents. Do not get me wrong. It was just a very odd pairing, didn't really go anywhere. They only held it for like less than 2 weeks. They hot potatoed a lot of titles around in the WCW invasion. Can't imagine why that thing failed. Well, it failed for a lot of reasons that I may do at some point, like in a 20-year reflection. That will be in about a year and a half, but still. Then we go to number 74, Ric Flair and Blackjack Mulligan. They held it for 2 weeks. Okay. Blackjack Mulligan, pretty goddamn tough guy. You know, the Blackjacks are pretty damn popular, not the new Blackjacks. Even though Wyndham was a legit athlete, Bradshaw was also there. But Blackjack Mulligan, Blackjack Lanza, they were a good team. Flair and Mulligan seemed to, and I'm not talking about golfing, seemed to work actually pretty well together. And I believe had a friendship. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's sad that Blackjack Mulligan is no longer with us. Thankfully, Ric Flair still is, despite all his health issues. This is just a title reign. It was just like 2 weeks, and it was back when they were still trying to find their footing with Flair because the Blackjacks pretty much were phased out by, I want to say, the early 80s and stuff like that. They would become road agents. Well, at least Mulligan would. I don't know about Lanza, but they were a good pairing. They just didn't have the titles very long. We then get to number 73. It's Scotty Riggs and Buff Bagwell as the American males. American males. Hey, Zach, that theme's in your head now. Zach Donegan, he knows what I'm talking about. Also, that theme is very, very addicting and everything, and it was also very early 90s, and it was kind of shit, but it was also awesome at the same time. They had the titles for nine days, and it was 1 reign. I like Scotty Riggs. I think Scotty Riggs deserved better than he got from the company. Buff Bagwell, sorry. I mean, I don't think Scotty Riggs is going to listen to that. I think everybody's got something better to do. You know, wrestlers got something better to do than watch my videos. And if you do, thank you. Thank you for watching them. But I always thought Scotty Riggs deserved better. I always thought he was better than Buff Bagwell. They were a good team. Do not get me wrong. They were a pretty damn good team. A nice little goofy, you know, undercard babyface team. But I always thought Scotty Riggs was more of the breakout star. WCW thought otherwise and pushed Buff Bagwell. They held it for 9 days. What the fuck you want me to say? And then we get to 72, the Hardy Boys. They held it for 15 days. Again, more invasion bullshit. Just why? And I like the Hardy Boys. They weren't tag team champions after this because they would fade away and, you know, be classified as obsolete for a number of years. Actually, they would split in the brand split, you know, when Matt went to SmackDown and then Jeff stayed on Raw, and then Jeff left the company in February of 03 or March of 03. And then all that stuff and everything. But them as tag team champions, look, they're a legit tag team. They still are even now. If they came back tomorrow, or if they came back on SmackDown next week and competed for the tag titles and beat the New Day, or, face the Revival, I would be all for that. I think they could work pretty well together. That being said, at this time, they were just throwing titles on anybody just to do whatever. So it happened. We then get to the Dudley Boyz, 26 days, 1 reign. Again, more invasion bullshit. Yeah, they held them for almost a month. The Dudley Boyz, this is before Bully Ray decided to run Ring of Honor into the ground with shit booking. And if he's not the booker of Ring of Honor, I'd sure like to know who the fuck is, because they need some goddamn help. But they were a great team. They were great in ECW. They were good in WWE, and great at times. And then they were good in TNA, despite when it was TNA, despite being hamstrung by some of the worst booking. Oh, the electrified cage at Lockdown 2007. Oh boy. I might do some more retro reviews of Impact wrestling events, by the way, at some point. But they just held him for under a month and lost him. Bubba Ray and Devon worked well together. So that's adding some legitimacy to it. And hey, at least they almost held it for a month, more than the Hardys did. We then get to number 69. Nice. The Giant and Sting, 18 days, 1 reign. This is the kind of bullshit that just made me wonder how WCW stuck around. And not that WWE wasn't doing bullshit in 98, because Russo was, being put in charge of creative. Along with that, Ferrara. We still haven't forgiven him for that Oklahoma gimmick. And don't worry, I'll reference that on that Cruiserweight, Light Heavyweight title list that I talked about. But anyway, the Giant and Sting were tag team champions. And then the Giant defected back to the black and white, the NWO black and white, That. I'm disappointed because this is a WWE shop shirt. And I actually had the old WCW, the original WCW NWO shirt. But unfortunately, it was starting to get faded and everything because the shirt was over 20 years old. I had to get rid of it, and I had to get another one. But that's okay, right. Anyway, so Giant defects back to the black and white while still tag team champions with Sting, who's part of the Wolf Pack. So they had, and I want to say it was Great American Bash 98. The main event was Sting as a member of the Wolf Pack versus the Giant as a member of NWO Black and White for control of the tag team championship. If you can wrap your head around that, you're better than the goddamn bookers. It was goddamn ridiculous that they did this shit. I can't fucking believe they did that. Honestly, I can't fucking believe it. It's absolutely mind-numbingly stupid. Sting won, by the way, and then I believe, if I'm right, him and Nash were champions, and then lost to Giant and Scott Hall soon after. Or I think it was actually, no, it was I want to say July 20th, 1998. Something like that. 20th or something like that. Or 18th. The whole point is Giant and Sting were champions for that, and they were feuding for most of it. That's how you build a tag division. Number 68, Buff Bagwell and Too Cold Scorpio, 20 days, 1 reign. Yeah, Scorpio carried Bagwell here, and Scorpio deserved better in WCW also, but he did better in ECW. And then he was Flash Funk in WWE. That's a great use of him, even though he made the most of his gimmick. Seriously. Too Cold Scorpio deserved a whole lot better, though he did carry Bagwell, so I gotta give him credit for that. Number 67, Wahoo McDaniel and Paul Jones, 27 days, 1 reign. This is back when Paul Jones was actually a pretty good wrestler, pretty goddamn over. Him and Wahoo still had some, had their feet under him, still had some years left in the ring, and for that era and for that area, they actually worked pretty well. They held it for under a month, but still. Then we get to number 66, Ray Stevens and Ivan Koloff, 28 days, 1 reign. Bit of an odd pairing, even though a lot of people, myself included, tend to forget just how great of a heel Ray Stevens was, and he traveled around a whole lot. I think he was in San Francisco for Royce Shire, and was pretty damn over there. He's over in the AWA, Bockwinkel and Stevens, and he also traveled to the Carolinas, and he worked a whole, he worked a lot of really, really good tag teams, and was a pretty good single star in some areas. And Ivan Koloff, his reputation speaks for himself, beat Bruno in the Garden in 71 to the shock of everybody. Goddamn crowd was so silent. But interesting pairing, just didn't last very long. Just under a month. Number 65, the Harris Brothers / Creative Control / the two bald guys They have Nazi tattoos on them. Or at least one of them does. I think both of them do. And let's just say this. There ain't no room for that in this goddamn world. Stop supporting fucking Nazis, you fucking idiots. But also, looking at those guys, I'm not too goddamn shocked. Also, that aside, they were never a really good team. They were never good as the Blue Brothers, Jacob and Eli Blue, when they had poofy hair. They were like the taller berserkers. Or they were like just, goofier berserkers. That's really what I thought it was. I actually, at 14, I thought they split the berserker in two and just made him a tag team. I don't know why I thought that, and I still think weird shit even now. And then they were Skull and 8-Ball, I believe, as part of the Disciples of Apocalypse. And then they were Creative Control. They were a shit tag team, by the way, and they held the tag titles for 40 days over 3 reigns. Let me put that into perspective. That's 13.3 days on average for a reign. Less than 2 weeks. And people wonder why WCW was hard to watch back, or like in the last couple of years. Because Creative Control was Creative Control. It was a Russo idea and stuff like that. And it was also Standards and Practices, and whoever else was in charge thought that, hey, this is some really good idea. We're going to turn everything on its ear, and we're going to do some great stuff. And no, fucking wasn't. It was fucking bullshit. The Harris brothers are goddamn idiots. They are. I don't care how legit tough they might be. They got Nazi tattoos on them. They're fucking idiots. Then we go to number 64, West Texas Rednecks, easy for me to say. The Wyndham brothers, Barry and Kendall. They had one reign, and it was for 20 days. Some legitimacy. Barry Windham, pretty goddamn legit athlete. Kendall could work well with his brother. Kendall wasn't bad. Kendall was a mid-card guy. He was never anybody that was going to be anything more than a mid-card guy. But working with Barry, with his more veteran brother, even though I think Kendall wasn't that far behind Barry on experience. I think Kendall was a few years behind him. But still, they worked well together. I like the Rednecks stable. I thought it was pretty good. Still a shame about Bobby Duncan Jr. dying so young. And Kurt Hennig, sadly no longer with us also. But they were pretty good stable. They didn't last very long, but they were pretty good stable. But 20 days, not really that much of note. 63, Raven and Saturn, 22 days, 1 reign. Love Raven. Saturn was also very, very good. This was when they had their unlikely alliance after feuding for a while, and then Jericho had his feud with Saturn, and Saturn and Raven were a tag team, and they didn't know what the fuck to do with Raven and WCW. They didn't have a fucking goddamn clue, especially after the flock disbanded. When you could have used the guy at least as a fine mid-card champion. He was never going to be WCW champion. He was a world champion in ECW, and it worked there. But still, they could have used him a whole lot better than they did. Still, him and Saturn worked well together as a team, even if it didn't last long. Then we get to Buff Bagwell and Shane Douglas, 29 days, 1 reign. Shane Douglas carrying Buff Bagwell. Boy, I'm being needlessly mean to Buff Bagwell, or deservedly so, depending on what you believe. And I'm not the biggest fan of Shane Douglas either, but I always thought he worked well in tag teams or as a singles guy in ECW. Singles guy in WCW or, TNA or NWA TNA or WWE. I mean, his WWE run was like, he had the legs cut out from under him anyway. Still, he worked well. He worked well pretty much everywhere he went. If he was given at least a measure of something good. And he was a good tag team champion. It isn't the only time he's going to appear on this list. But he was very, very good. Bagwell less so, but Bagwell got featured a lot on this particular list, in the bottom part, because let's be honest, Buff Bagwell, his deficiencies could be hidden in tag teams. Less so when he was out on his own. Though he worked well in WCW. I think had that company stuck around, he might actually been able to work pretty well, but sadly it didn't happen. But come on, it's less than a month, and Douglas carried him. We then get to 61, Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood, 33 days, 2 reigns, so an average of about 16 and a half days per reign. Mark Youngblood gets forgotten about. I would encourage looking up about him to know what I'm talking about. Wahoo, once again, being featured pretty well in tag teams. Certainly not bad. I mean, hey, at least the combined reigns were, for over a month. Not much over a month, but at least we're getting a little bit better on figures. After a little bit, I'm going to actually finish up here in just a few, and then I'm actually going to do 2 more parts after this. But then we talk about number 60, that's Kurt Hennig. I almost said Barry Hennig and Kurt Windham. It's the fusion dance. No, Curt Hennig and Barry Windham. 21 days, 1 reign. The Texas Rednecks coming back. I always screw up West Texas Rednecks. I really had to struggle to say that right there. They were phenomenal stable, as I listed before. Hennig and Windham, even at this stage of their career, could still, or respective careers, could still pull out some good matches. Barry didn't wrestle much after this, and Hennig, unfortunately, by 2002, was not necessarily out of the business. He did appear on Impact, NWA TNA for a bit, until his unfortunate death. But they were a good team here, even if the reigns didn't last that long. They did add legitimacy. Barry being a former tag team champion, Hennig as well, being a former tag team champion, in other promotions. So yeah, not long, but at least it was a little bit of credibility. Then we get to 59. Barry Windham and Lex Luger. I'm not fond of giving credit to Lex Luger, though this did lead to Barry Windham turning heel on Lex Luger, because it was like, oh God, they're going to battle against the Horsemen. I believe they won the titles. If I remember right, I think they won the titles on the first Clash of Champions. And then they lost them soon after. And then Barry became a top heel and actually beat Dusty Rhodes for the U.S. Championship at Great American Bash 88. Luger and Windham winning the tag titles was a big goddamn deal, though, because they had just turned Luger babyface soon after, or soon before this. And him and Windham were really dynamite as a team. I mean, again, not fond of giving credit to Luger, but they did work well. And though the reign didn't last long, and it did end with Barry turning on Lex Luger, it still worked for a huge pop. And hey, it was two powerhouses as champions, and Barry being able to shoulder the load as being a great wrestler as well. 58, Filthy Animals, Kidman and Conan, 28 days, 1 reign. Again, back to the Filthy Animals. Kidman may have not been the best promo, but Kidman was so goddamn good in the ring. You just gave him a mouthpiece. I think could have worked really well, like as a singles guy. I'm sure the injury bug kind of bit him in WWE, but still. Kidman and Conan, it was nice to see Conan kind of giving back and helping out some younger guys. Not that Conan was old, but he had been well established by this point. They were a good team. They only held it for 4 weeks, but still, hey, at least it was something. We then get to number 57, Nash and Sting, 35 days, 1 reign. This, after the Great American Bash, match I talked about with Sting and Giant. This is their reign that lasted for just over a month. And then, they lost them to Scott Hall and the Giant, because hot potatoing titles is fun. But Nash and Sting, they were two singles guys, 2 megastars. They were put together as a team. Hey, they worked well together. At least it added something to the tag team championships. Hey, at least the tag team championships were on 2 guys that weren't goddamn feuding, so that was an improvement. And finally, 56. Paul Jones and Ricky Steamboat, 45 days, 1 reign. Paul Jones being, again, still quite a talent at this point. Ricky Steamboat, young up-and-comer, who had been established as, somebody to absolutely watch. Feuded with Ric Flair over the TV title, US title, that kind of stuff, in the 70s, very early 80s. And Paul Jones, somebody that did have a name in that area. Yeah, 45 days, 1.5 months. Some pretty good stuff with the tag titles. So that's where I'm going to end this stuff, actually. I'm going to try to make these no more than 30 minutes, so I still have 55 other entrants to go through, so it's at least going to be 2 other videos. It might be 3, depending on if I go crazy with a whole bunch of tangents and stuff. But that's what I have to say. Agree, disagree with what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.